Knows about the advantages of buying physical silver, especially silver, over buying the actual, ticker, stock ticker, basically the SLV or PSLV, the AGQ or whatever. The other thing is, though, what you're probably going to see in the future is going to be totally unexpected. Even the Financial Times has acknowledged that the number of contracts out there on gold greatly exceeds the supply in the COMEX. Greatly. The Financial Times. You're talking major media, right? They acknowledge that, if everybody took physical possession of gold, it greatly would wipe out the COMEX. So why don't they? I don't know. I sure as hell would. I have electronic investments, but not as much as in physical. But let me put this example, because human emotion and panic, really has no bounds. Humans will do the stupidest things, actually, in times of panic and due to greed, due to emotions, and fear. And this is why you could possibly get a hell of a lot for your gold or silver. And physical probably, it's definitely the way to go for the most part. For the most part. Not to do everything you have into a physical gold. Now, what I suspect is going to happen is there's going to be a loss of faith in a lot of the financial markets, because, what happened to MF Global? It's out of the news now, right? You don't hear nothing. You heard about Cyprus with the bail-in, right? It's a big emotional topic at the time, but these things are going to keep going on. There's going to be a new MF Global. There's going to be another place that, there's going to have a bail-in or some type of something like that's going to happen. I suspect in the United States it's not going to be that severe. They're probably just going to inflate money away. And, maybe they will have a debt default at one point in time. Mathematically, it seems to be certain. But what's going to happen to the price of physical gold or physical silver? It'll skyrocket. I think the exchange price, yes, will go way up, but physical may go past the exchange price. And the reason I'm saying is, it's right now it means nothing, but just look at the example of, say, the spot price of retail gasoline that's on the market, and yes, it rises somewhat during catastrophic conditions where there's hurricanes or bad weather in the United States or whatever, or say there was an earthquake, but maybe in certain areas it could be 2 or 3 times what it is when people actually have to have it and they can't get it. And this is where you might find an opportunity, and it's not going to be an opportunity that's going to be there forever. An opportunity will come by at one point in time. It'll knock on the door, where your physical silver may be worth a hell of a lot more than even the spot price, even though the spot price went up a lot more, due to panic and fear. Do not underestimate people's panic mode when they get into panic mode. It's quite obvious. Alex Jones has made a very successful career of putting people on panic mode all the time. I almost got to comment on that guy a little bit. If I was that guy, Alex Jones, say, for instance, and I was really believed, say 10% of the junk he puts, whatever that really is, stuff he puts out, I'd be living in the mountain, in a deep underground cavern someplace. And I wouldn't even be dealing with, the world, the way he is. It's like, I'd be broadcasting shortwave from some remote area that you couldn't trace or something. This guy, he's so much out in the open. It's like, he doesn't believe what the hell he's saying. It's fear for money. But it's a human emotion that's prevalent. Fear, panic, not just greed. It's actually fear and panic. And you notice this happens all the time, even with the people in silver. When it goes up, they're all like, ah, and when it goes down, they get all, emotional all the way. And, the thing is, that's what's going to happen. It's going to play in your favor later on if there is a banking crisis, whereby, some banks fold up because the too big to fails are being pumped up by the federal government. And, the federal government's being pumped up by just creating money and more debt. That's why it's just simple 101 that physical is going to go right back to square one. It is. It may not just be gold and silver all only. It could be a lot of other things that people need, like food and energy products, but gold and silver is still going to be high up on the list because it's a convenient method of exchange. And it always has been, it always has held up very well and done very well with true wealth, and actually boomerang the other way temporarily when a currency crisis happened, and that's what's definitely going to happen. But, when you're talking physical versus electronic, yes, the electronic markets will go up if there becomes a panic and there's a crisis in the U.S. dollar and there becomes a panic where people are trying to get gold and silver. Yes, the electronic markets will go up, but the physical markets will actually exceed that. I got a glimpse at some things that actually happen in some real exotic metals markets dealing with isotopes. And there's various types of isotopes. There's caesium isotopes. There's different types, 137, 133. I don't even know I forgot what they are. There's copper isotopes. And the prices, man, they could be all over the freaking place. It's like, whatever they're willing to pay. There's no spot market on that stuff. And it's almost like, when it gets down to the real physical world, in reality, and somebody has to have something because they think they have to have it because of fear. If silver's commanding like $75 an ounce on the spot market, you might be able to sell eagles at 100. It sounds crazy now, but it may be the case. Because I think, this happens with any market still. It's like it works with houses, it works with it works even in the toy market, for crying out loud. If you don't have enough of these toys for the kids and all of a sudden it becomes a fad and there's not enough of them around, it goes up 3-4 times. It's just how it happens. That's just what happens, Even with that, but with gold and silver, if there's actually a currency crisis, the physical, yes, the spot markets are going to go up, but the physical is probably going to exceed the spot market. And, it's almost like you can think of what happens in a weather situation when there's a hurricane or an earthquake. What happens to the price of retail price of sales of gasoline? Yeah, it goes up. The spot market goes up, but when people have to have it and there's not enough to go around, it could be 2 or 3 times higher. And that's something you can expect. So for you wise people who packed away your acorns, just like the squirrel, I gave the example of the squirrel packing away acorns because, sometimes a squirrel has more brains than a human does, Squirrels realize that, there's cycles and things like that. But, yeah, and actually, the cycle we're going through, there's actually several, actually I should talk about this, economic cycles. Yeah, I know with a squirrel there's like a winter cycle and there's a summer cycle and all that. It's pretty simple, but we actually have a few cycles going on, and we actually have a major macro cycle going on. It's about an 80-year cycle. Besides, the mini cycles and the ups and downs and the booms and busts, seems like every 80 years we get this major catastrophic calamity. And as despite all the hardship that's been going on over the last several years, we actually have not hit the actual Greater Depression yet. And the one thing that's actually going to save us with that is going to be anybody that comes up with better ideas on energy, especially energy. Because if you look at what uplifted all mankind throughout the last, say, since the 1800s, it was when you started using coal for energy, then we went to oil, and now they got hydroelectric is some of it, and maybe a little bit of nuclear or whatever, but basically it's oil based. It's actually through cheap energy that's uplifted mankind, because it took a lot of the labor out of food production, and it now allowed the transportation of goods and services between the producers who specialize in different items to be transported to each other back and forth. Suppliers can get, manufacturers can get the supplies cheap enough to manufacture something from different areas. They need all these different supplies, or subcontractors, and they put it together at one location. Energy cost actually is the key to the whole productivity of an economy. And that is my contention of also why silver is really going to go up, because we are going to hit an energy spike in oil prices, and it could be brought about by Middle East tensions. Now, there's something else going on if you want to talk about tensions. See, Middle East tensions is nothing. Actually, I shouldn't say it's nothing, but a lot of people think that if there was a war breakout with Iran, it's the end of the world. No, because Iran is not really that strong. Whatever you believe politically or whatever, if the United States got in a war backing Israel against Iran, it would be, forget about it. I mean, Iran would get clobbered, despite they have twice the population of Iraq or whatever, and they have more mountains, more areas. Forget about it. But what's going on also at this time, and this is actually where we can have a currency crisis, a debt crisis, because we can get our military overextended with spending, and also it's with China. And what it's over, they're extending their territorial waters, and what's going on is they are actually challenging the U.S. Navy in many cases to like a game of chicken. Like a ship will be going this way, so the Chinese ship will sit right here, so you're going to collide with us unless you change course, because now you're in Chinese waters. We declared like all these waters Chinese waters, because why is China doing that? Oil. China is energy starved to the max. Now, I know what I would do, but it's too evil. I'm not going to put it out on here, because it would work out very good with the United States and China, and would avert everything. I'm not going to put out what my plan would be, because it would avert every damn thing. I'm not going to put this out, but because people get pissed off, and I don't know, but it would work. It would freaking work. I'm surprised our leaders are so stupid sometimes, man. I don't get it. Because the Russians would go along with it too. I ain't going to say what it is. But that's my little shrewd mind, That's my little shrewd mind, but they'll screw up. And maybe, I don't know, maybe our leaders aren't that stupid. I'm shrewd, they're stupid. But anyway, let me just reiterate again, though. You're going to be surprised at what's going to happen with the physical price of silver. The spot market's going to go up. And I mean, it's not like right away. But like I said, MF Global, it's out of the news. It's going to happen again. There's going to be another one. There's not going to maybe Cyprus, that's out of the news. It's going to happen again. And people are going to start waking up. And, there isn't enough silver out there. Now, I'm not talking about silver in the ground. I'm talking about silver coins that are like eagles and maples and all this type of stuff. I'm talking about that type of stuff. Stuff that's recognizable, even walking liberties that are generic, the J.P. Morgan generics and stuff. The old silver coins that the U.S. used to have that were 90% silver. There isn't enough of that stuff around. People have to have it because they fear they're going to lose everything. Hey, it can go way the hell up, and that's just how it is. That's just how it is. And it's not going to stay like that. Like I said, panic doesn't last that long. When Beanie Babies was going, or Gorbachev dolls. Remember that guy that had Gorbachev dolls? They were selling dolls with the freaking Gorbachev with those little birthmark patch on his bald head. They were selling those on eBay or whatever the hell it was. They're going for some crazy exorbitant amount. It's just like that. It's like that with anything. It's like that with the real estate market. People buy houses and they flip them. They buy a house and they sell them to somebody else for more money. They didn't even do anything. Nothing. An extra 20, 30,000 right there. Boom. Yeah, they found somebody. Yeah, this is a great deal. They tell you all this bullshit about the house and stuff like that. Why you should, the location, it's all around. Location. It's a great investment. It's going to go up. You know, you can't lose out. Real estate, you know, it's a long-term hold and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you know, people talk about silver people being doing stuff like that. It's like that everywhere, man. It's like that everywhere. But at least, you know, the thing is, with physical silver, you ain't getting any suits out there really selling this shit too much. Not too many. Not too many. Really relatively few. And, you know, with physical silver, none of these guys are making any money off you after they sell it to you. That's just how it is. That's really how it is. Like, if you're a broker and, you know, you got, you know, $50 million under your management, you might be making like $200,000 a year off of that. Okay? Now, if you're somebody that sold $50 million worth of coins to somebody, say I sold $50 million worth of coins to people by putting out these videos, right? You know how much you get out of that? Nothing. Come on. I don't get like this commission. You know what I mean? And actually, you know, I got no association with Eric Sprott or James Turk or Morgan or Faber or any Schiff or any of those guys, man. I got nothing to do with that shit. Nothing. I'm just telling you plain common sense. But, you know, physical, when there's a panic, you know, it's like, do you have the stuff or you don't? You know, I don't give a shit with the prices. You know, let me give you an example. Like, if there's a hurricane and there's generators and people need generators, right, for electricity in their houses. Yeah, well, you know, Lowe's and Home Depot were selling generators and they're $500. Well, you know what? They're all of a sudden they're $1,000 because you have to have them then. That's why this opportunity will come up with physical silver. Not only is it going to go up in the spot price, but the physical price is, when it goes really hyperbolic in a spot price, the physical price is going to go even higher. But it ain't going to stay that way forever. And you know what? This is the real catch-all. You're really going to have to be lucky to catch the exact top because very few are. It's going to take some damn luck. But you know, an indication is when the gold and silver ratio is a big indication when it's getting heavy. You know, it's getting like top heavy. In other words, you know, last time the silver, you could buy 31.5 ounces, around 31 ounces of silver was 1 ounce of gold when it peaked out last time. The next time, it should break through that. And the final time, it might go to 15 or 10. But it may only happen like that for a week. That's a good indication. But, you know, not everybody's going to be that lucky. But, you know, you always got to look at the next step. You always got to look at the next step. And, you know, I don't want to get too focused in on this silver junk because there's a lot of this stuff out there because, you know, I'm going to talk about some other things about also healing with frequencies. I've been doing more research on that, and there's better products out there and than some of the standard zappers they sell, but the problem is they're more expensive, and actually I may be getting something else again. I got so many products as it is that I think would be very important to have if there's a problem where you know, the healthcare system's all screwed up and you don't have access to this and that. You know, what kind of magic device, I don't want to call it a magic device, what kind of actual device would actually work that's electronic? You know, I mean, I know silver's great for colloidal silver, and that's some pretty good stuff. And you can use it a lot of different ways. Like, for instance, if you have colloidal silver and you put it in I actually have a video on this, and I found out about this from real people. If you put colloidal silver in a warm air mister, not something that makes it into steam and distills as steam distilled water, but the kind that's designed for putting medicine in the vapor, it's just a warm air mister. If you put colloidal silver in there, you'll get into your lungs. So if you have like a cold or you have pneumonia, and you have the colloidal silver will actually get right to the area where the infection is. So never sell all your silver because it's good to have some around for medical purposes, and there is some novel uses of it other than just drinking it. So anyway, the price, you know what, and if a lot of people knew this, if you had 1 million Americans, or let's say 100 million Americans, you'd have to have 10 ounces. Forget about it. That's 1 billion ounces right there. Just for medical purposes. Figure that one out. That's why, you know, a lot of people are just totally in the dark on this junk, and I don't know. Even if they're not even thinking of it for investment purposes, they ought to be thinking of it as like not, a corollary medical purpose. In other words, something as an adjunct to your normal medicine. If a lot of people thought of it that way, it would take all the silver right off the market in a second flat. It's amazing. I mean, if I was working for freaking David, these guys like David Morgan, Eric Sprott, and all these, they're idiots. I can freaking, you know what? I know how to sell silver faster than they ever could because I wouldn't even freaking be hitting it from the approaches they are. I'd be doing it from another approach is called a special time Argentium jewelry silver too. It would wipe out the whole freaking supply inside of no time. I know how I could push it. Oh, I know how. I'm not even going to go into details. These guys are stupid. But I'm not pushing silver. I'm just actually telling people that it is a freaking smart investment. And watch, the physical is going to go beyond the spot price after it goes hyperbolic. It will, because people are going to have it. And you know what? They're going to pay more than spot because of fear and panic. Just like they panic when it goes down, they panic when it goes up. There's people like that. They're emotional. They'll pay more. When it's way up there and it looks like it's going to go too high, they're going to panic and they pay more for physical than they will for the spot price. And that's especially with eagles and maples. That's just how it is.